You are listening to an MLGA Network podcast.
Welcome to Thank You for Your Servers, a show which looks at the tech news of today, but from a libertarian perspective. Now here are your hosts, Thaddeus and Gary.
Thank you for logging on to Thank You for Your Servers. I'm Thaddeus Preston, aka Nick Way, and this is our weekly rant about tech topics of the week from a libertarian perspective. And this week I have a guest host, hopefully co-host. Introduce yourself, Gary.
Hi, everybody. Gary Guthrie here. I'm sitting over here on the left coast. This is my first time ever recording something for a podcast, so bear with me. And my glass of Woodford Reserve that hopefully will keep me loose, but not too loose.
Excellent, excellent. This podcast is brought to you by the Make Liberty Great Again network of podcasts, and we're ready to get into it. So, with no further ado, the new co-host of Thank You for Your Servers wants to get into the first topic. Gary, man, you take it away, man.
So, last week, a co-worker of mine actually turned me on to the new Ring Neighborhood app, and wanted to kind of explore that a little bit. One of my backgrounds is network security, data security, and it was interesting to me that we had this application that people could share content that was recorded at their doorstep. And the idea is that these Ring doorbells that everybody's getting, everybody's familiar with, and they're uploading all of their videos to the cloud, they can share that information with their neighbors whenever something suspicious happens, whenever a package gets stolen, that sort of thing. And for me, it's kind of a scary thing just because people are sharing this stuff.
Sounds a little Big Brotherish to me, right?
There's a temptation to go conspiracy theorist on it, that there's something bigger going on and everything. But really, from a practical standpoint, to really focus on what's going on, what the use is, because I actually downloaded the app and I put my neighborhood in place, and I was able to see within a mile or two of my house, a couple of incidents that had happened and a couple of recordings that people had done. And it was really eye-opening that here I am in South Orange County, California, supposedly one of the safest places in the world, and we've got people stealing packages from doorsteps. We've got people breaking into cars at night. So it was very, like I said, eye-opening. But at the same time, I'm sitting here going from a security standpoint, okay, these people are just blindly sharing their information with the world. What's the possible outcome of this? And what does it mean going forward where, people are just signing up for this stuff and they're clicking the disclosures and the privacy notices without reading anything. And
oh yeah, you just click through that stuff these days, right? Because it's so nebulous
right.
and legalese and and indemnifying to the company in question. I guess what I take from this story is I think there's a selfish reason why Amazon's doing this. Like, it's not a good look to have your packages that you deliver stolen off of front porches. So they have a selfish reason for it. Also, from a analytical standpoint, inevitably that's a lot of data that is being dumped into the cloud. There's other uses for that types of data, right? Particularly the image data and stuff like that. Yeah, it is a bit frightening, but I think it seems to be that's just the reality of the world today. People are just oversharing this stuff, and there is great value that can come from oversharing that stuff. But you said they'll put on the conspiracy theory hat, but it is freaky, right? This stuff can be inevitably subpoenaed.
Absolutely.
In the future, right? So, I understand why, right? No one likes their packages being stolen, and you want to find out who the hell did that, and if it helps a company from a I guess from a data standpoint, from a trend standpoint, to know like what neighborhoods it's probably best to not leave packages on the front porch, and maybe just deliver it to a distribution center or intermediate center so that the customer experience is better. That's the positive. It helps them not lose a lot of money. That's a positive. But yeah, what are we inevitably giving up for the convenience of this?
Well, I will tell you, just from a strict consumer standpoint and a resident standpoint, it's a brilliant application. I was really surprised at how, at least perceptually valuable, this thing is, where I can go in, look at this thing and say, okay, show me some of the things that are going on in my neighborhood. And it gives me a set of eyes that I never had before. So brilliant move on the part of...
There's something to be said about that transparency. Yeah. Just knowing your surroundings.
Right. I mean, brilliant move on the part of Amazon, and whatever their motives are. I'm sure there are some legitimate ones. Are there some nefarious ones? I don't know, maybe. But am I scared of it? I don't know. I
think there's a little bit of opportunity for there to be fear, but also I think this is the future. There are positive aspects to for neighborhood safety, law enforcement, and you're really indemnifying the company against anything else that happens to happen here that'll happen in the future, right? I mean, when you're again, what we will find across many of our stories in this show is, when you're dealing with people, you can't have this utopian view of like, hey, being able to order things and having it delivered and stuff like that. There's potential for fraud. There's potential for things to be stolen. But
you stated it best, people, whenever you inject human beings into the mix, I don't care how well-intentioned the people are or how well-intentioned the company is, somebody is going to be in there looking to take advantage of it, and they will. It's the nature of security.
Hence why this application exists. And so, yeah, but that said, I think we should probably get into the one of our first kind of not deep dive topics, but the topics of the show today. And I think it is just IPOs, and I think really dealing with. I'm very, very fascinated by this, particularly because you and I both kind of came up in the 90s, and we saw like the .com boom, and we were always very, we're always very hesitant about these new companies going public. But it's also like this like new crop of IPOs that seem to be coming to public market. They're not coming to public market as quickly as companies in the past. Amazon, of course, being one of them. But they're coming to market after having been on the market for having been companies for a decade. The first one that filed a confidential IPO this week was WeWork. And WeWork is the tech company that I guess is responsible for co-working spaces. And I think from their perspectives, the creators of this company, I mean, they transform buildings into these dynamic working environments for collaboration. And they filed for an IPO this week. They will they will most likely, looks like they'll trade on the New York Stock Exchange. But looking at their numbers, man, like they're not profitable, but they've been making money. Like, I mean, they're making money, but they're just not profitable. I mean,
now, is this one of these? I'm sorry, but I'm unfamiliar with this company. Is this one of these where they create like eggs, like you know what I'm saying? These seats that look like eggs that are supposed to be like isolation chambers, or
yeah, like I think in a lot of their co-working spaces they have these kind of isolation chambers. They have these areas where you have basically it's like a hot desk. Right, like you just kind of drop in with your laptop, and there's amenities there. Like for instance, I've actually seen some of these where they've had these like little isolation eggs and these little cubicles and stuff like that. And I've read an article in the past where WeWork is just it's not really a tech company. It's more of a real estate company.
I mean,
that happens to just use tech?
Have these ideas ever worked? I mean, in the mid 2000s, I worked for Capital One, and we tried a lot of this stuff, and we found that it really didn't work. I mean, is it just another one of these trendy things that's coming along, or?
Well, I get the fact of the matter is that it has been tried, internally in some of these companies. I think this works only because they threw a veneer of technology over it, and so one can efficiently, like they are, like allocate these real estate holdings to have these co-working spaces.
Okay.
I mean, the proof's in the pudding. I mean, since, in 2017 they made 886 million.
Wow.
In 2018 they made 1.82
Wow.
billion. Now, granted, they're still in those respective years they've lost 933 million and 1.9 billion, 1.9 billion respectively in 2017 and 2018. But they've increased by like 105% and 108%. And I mean, they're growing like leaps and bounds. And granted, they're still not profitable, but they have crazy occupancy rates in these co-working spaces. And you got to think, it's a different generation of people who actually like these co-working spaces. I, for one, don't, but there's a huge generation of these kind of these kind of freelancers, right?
That's a good point. I mean, maybe back in the 15 years ago, we were just ahead of our time and we were trying to implement something for the sake of doing it rather than actually finding people who could latch onto it and find their efficiencies from it.
Yeah, I know with the contracting company I was with, like there was always co-working space to go to. Simply because like sometimes you had to move around, sometimes you had to do. So I've been doing it since I've left the military. I've been doing it my whole like professional career, where it's just like I need a laptop, an account, and access to your network, and typically I'm going to work wherever I can. And I don't like it. I like having an office. I like having a place to be. But apparently these a lot of freelancers, and from a liberty perspective, I mean you're a sole proprietor, you're a one-man, two-man operation. Why do you need to rent office space?
You do whatever it takes.
You have to do whatever it takes, right? And so, so these guys are going public. And then, of course, the granddaddy of them all who will be going public here is everyone's company, the company that everybody in Silicon Valley hates, and that is Uber. Uber is Uber is expected to raise between 80 and $100 billion in its IPO.
Oh my God!
It will probably make the hated Travis. What is it? What's his last name? I don't remember. But it'll make Travis Kalanick worth $8 billion at the high end, even though Silicon Valley hates his guts. I like the guy. I like the guy because he spits in the eye of the valley. But like they are been losing money forever. But like. They're losing money. They have, unlike Lyft, which went IPO a couple weeks ago, like there are other verticals, revenue generation schemes in Uber. Like Uber Eats is really, really big in the urban centers. This is just an anecdotal story. Like a guy I work with, his wife is a retiree. She drives for Uber. She says nearly 70% of what she does is do Uber Eats. And not to mention like every city I go to, like you see Uber and Lyft. You have people who double dip, who do Uber and Lyft, who are drivers. This company is huge. And to think that they won't long-term do anything in the logistics space, to do anything in like the autonomous vehicle space, they're making money, and it's kind of weird. I mean, just their roadshow shows that they're not terribly profitable, but I mean, what is it? I think I'm trying to bring up their revenues here, like the ride sharing specifically. Uber's revenues increased from 3.5 billion in 2016 to 9.2 in 2018. Now, granted, they have to they distribute that, right, because they have drivers and stuff like that, but their gross bookings are $41.5 billion last year. And it's a massive company. I don't care how much they're losing. I think this one has a little bit more longevity than Lyft. I don't know what you feel about it, about Uber. I mean, I like the company.
I love the entrepreneurial aspect of it. I have admittedly never used Uber or Lyft. My daughter has. She has had mixed reports on it, but I'll tell you something. One thing that I really love about Uber and Lyft is they're really taking I guess you could say the kind of, I don't want to say a loophole or whatever, but they're kind of spitting the eye of all the taxi companies and that sort of thing that traditionally has required an insane amount of investment, an insane amount of licensing, and they're really kind of doing away or sidestepping it, I guess is the best word.
I love the fact that they're not asking for permission; they're just asking for forgiveness. That's why I fell in love with the company. It's the ultimate counter economics way to get into a market. And yeah, it hasn't worked in every market, but for the most part, like, they grew so big so quickly and became such an essential service that cities that have attempted to ban them, Austin being one example, people have been highly upset. And eventually Uber came back. And so yeah, I love this. I'm always happy when people get rich, particularly from an idea that no one wanted to be plausible, right? Everyone loves it.
You know, when you think outside the box, you think outside of the legal box, if you will. I mean, look at what Tesla did with their direct-to-consumer sales with no dealerships, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about...
They're still fighting those, too. They're still fighting those in some states.
Yeah. But they're doing it brilliantly. But yeah, you're right. I mean, state by state, they're going to have their own rules and regulations. But Tesla has done an amazing job of just navigating this weird angle that nobody ever thought of, because we've been selling cars the same way for 100 years. You know?
No, man. And so... hopefully the congratulations will be in order for these companies. Both of these companies are almost 10 years old. They've taken a very circuitous route to IPO, and this is just proof positive, man, that when you think outside the box and you don't ask for permission and you just kind of come with a different angle of things, man, you can absolutely positively just change the world. Speaking of which, man, I'm hearing SpaceX, another Elon Musk property, is attempting to launch broadband satellites into orbit to give us ubiquitous broadband.
This is very interesting. I work in the IT space, in the particularly in auto finance industry, and this idea of global broadband coming to areas where traditionally they haven't had connectivity or they haven't had the ability to connect, and be that from either just because of physical limitations, because of the companies that are there haven't had the opportunity to expand out into the areas where these people are. I think this is a phenomenal move. I think Elon Musk is a genius for tapping into this. Interesting, I'm looking at an article right now where they're negotiating essentially with the FCC to have their satellites put at lower altitudes, and it's kind of a cool move. They originally had signed up to put these satellites at a very high altitude, which was going to require more satellites. It was going to require more power to get them up there. They've negotiated with the FCC, and the whole reason for having them at a higher altitude is
coverage. Yeah,
coverage, right? But there's this whole aspect of space debris, right? We've had so many satellites launched into orbit. We've had so much stuff up there, and not just things that the U.S. has had control over or an agreement with. We've had kind of rogue launches. Yet when you talk about Iran launching stuff up there, and they're just like, well, I don't care about what your rules are about where we need to launch this thing. We're just going to launch it, right?
Yeah.
So SpaceX has gotten the approval, and it's almost kind of a win-win situation. They've got an approval to basically, I think, almost halve or more than halve the altitude that they were going to have these things orbiting at. It requires less satellites, but also on the other side, if one of these satellites becomes disabled and has to come down to Earth, it's only going to take it a few years to come down, fully burn up in the atmosphere, which is the design of the satellite, right? SpaceX is actually designing these things to destroy themselves if they need to.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. I from a space perspective, it definitely makes sense for higher apertures for better coverage. Hence, you would probably it would probably be better. But like, yeah, there's a lot of junk up there, and there's free space in this kind of this kind of intermediate altitude to allow them to give this coverage and stuff. And the broader point, right, is like what will this inevitably enable, right? Even if SpaceX goes, TU in the next 10 years, if they get these things in orbit, right? The thing about it is, like, satellites are designed to have like a very finite shelf life in orbit. But I remember when I worked in aerospace, and particularly space communications and stuff, satellites that had no business being up there longer than 10, 15 years had been up there 20, 25 years, as long as you tweak their orbits and do whatever and stuff like that. So imagine, even if going forward SpaceX is no longer a going concern in 10 years, these satellites will be there, and like that connectivity will exist.
Right.
And yeah, just to being able to go to places like, sub-Saharan Africa, or the Moab or Zion National Park in Utah or anything like that, and have some sort of kind of relatively low latency, mid-tier broadband bandwidth.
Yeah, I think they're talking about less than 15 milliseconds of latency at this lower altitude.
That would be, yeah, and that's the better part of being at much more lower altitude, is like the round trip time is greatly decreased, as opposed to you sacrifice a little bit of coverage, but you have this incredible latency, because it's like, yeah, like the round trip time will be much, much better. Will it be perfect for like streaming gaming? No, and I don't really think that's what it's designed for. I don't really think it would even be all that good for video communications, maybe voice communications. But I mean, this is the stuff I love geeking out about. It's like Elon Musk smoking weed, Rogan. Yeah, he gets, there's a little bit of cronyism here, man, but the man is trying to change the world. And I may not necessarily agree entirely with his motives for doing so, man, but at every turn, no matter if it's, trying to dig a tunnel under the LA freeway, or, a giant flamethrower,
right,
or launching like 4,000 low Earth orbit satellites into orbit or whatever. I God bless the man, dude. I
love it. I mean, I have the only fear I have, and this goes back to kind of the liberty point of it all is, and you said it, what happens if the company goes TU? What happens if SpaceX just says, okay, we're done? But in the process of putting this stuff together, they've created a dependency, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that's true. I absolutely. And I'll let you finish your thought, man. But I have a story about that. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my fear is that you've got a dependency. Now you've got people who have invested maybe even their own existence or their own sustenance into the system that was built by Elon Musk. Well, he's no longer here because, okay, the company went belly up, or he flew to Mars and said, okay, forget it, we're done. Whatever the case is, right? But the fear is now you've got these people who are dependent on it, and you've got a void of who's running this thing. And by default, who takes over?
You're getting there.
You understand?
Yeah, you're getting there. You're almost there. No, you remember the Iridium constellation?
Yes.
Yes, that who owns the Iridium constellation now?
I do not.
Me and you.
Really?
The American taxpayer.
Yep.
Iridium went tee up in the mid 2000s.
Wow.
Because I remember, because I was in Ethiopia when we were kind of concerned, because we would take these phones basically with us. And, I was able to call my wife back in Germany when I was, in, the middle of Addis Ababa or whatever. And, or Dir Dawa, one of those cities out there near Somalia. And, what ended up happening is the U.S. government was heavily dependent on it, us, and the company was going to go bankrupt. And so the U.S. government ultimately ended up taking over, like basically paying them in a contract to maintain until such time as something else came online. But I still think Iridium is still has a government contract.
Wow.
And then that's ultimately who ended up taking it over.
Yep.
And, Iridium was a smaller constellation. I can imagine what, 4,000 low Earth orbit satellites, it takes a lot to maintain these things in orbit. And it's multiple ground stations, it's ground crews, it's, orbital mechanics, constantly trying to figure out what's going on. That costs money. And if SpaceX can't do it, or if they can't, lease out that capability and break it up in the event that SpaceX goes, the way of pets.com, then we will ultimately end up being responsible for it.
There's a lesson to be learned here culturally that, we can't be investing ourselves into this technology. I mean, here we are. I mean, look at us. We're sitting here. I'm in California. I'm talking on a freaking cell phone. I've got a tablet with a document open. I've got a computer that's recording voice. I am invested just in this podcast into so much technology. If one of these pieces breaks, I'm hosed, right?
Yeah.
And, not to go full survivalist or whatever, but there's a value culturally in knowing, okay, we need to plan for the inevitable, that if all this stuff goes away, how do we survive as a people? Right now, we can't.
Isn't it a little meta to think that maybe it's ironic more than anything that once this constellation, if this constellation is to get fully operational, it will enable people to kind of live in the middle of nowhere and be relatively self-sufficient, but yet this being the only tether they have back to civilization. Do you think maybe this would make us, while dependent on these SpaceX satellites for communication, ultimately not allowing us to live in more remote locations so that we are less dependent on people?
That is a fantastic thought. I mean, we're in a weird place where it's uncharted territory, right? We don't know. And what will come of it, it'll be interesting to watch at least. I don't know.
Well, we shall see, but good luck to SpaceX. Now it's my turn to yell. It's my what I like to call my weekly sinophobia rant, particularly when it comes to everyone's the most feared mobile company in the world, Huawei out of China. And this one, starting with really this BBC story that kind of jumped off from this TechCrunch story I read. So the UK has kind of they call it an amber light for some of the telecoms in the UK to start using some Huawei equipment on non-core, some of their non-core mobile networks, right? And as a response to this, right, because the UK intelligence organizations have said what we would use this Huawei equipment for, based on what the carriers have submitted, isn't necessarily critical and wouldn't necessarily be a threat to national security. But in our continuing xenophobia here in the United States, in our war against all things Chinese, the U.S. officials have warned that there is no safe level of involvement with the tech giant. You should use none of the equipment that Huawei provides. The U.S. has warned that its intelligence sharing with other countries would be reevaluated if those countries were to use Huawei to build their 5G networks. Say what you will about the military and intelligence industrial complex that is the first world nations of New Zealand, Australia, UK, and US sharing intelligence, which they've done since the end of World War, II. This is just more strong arming because I think while there's an rational fear, it's started to border on the irrational when it comes to Huawei. Here's a dirty little secret about Huawei. Huawei owns a lot of 5G patents. It doesn't matter if Vodafone in Europe or Verizon in the United States don't use Huawei equipment. They will use Huawei IP. And so I don't know if maybe the prohibition on buying the equipment is ultimately what we want, because I called it basically neo-mercantilism, right? Where like we're telling our companies here that you can't use any Huawei equipment. It's, and it's even kind of synced on to me. Huawei makes excellent phones, but I've yet to really even buy one because I was afraid of the fact that it was,
it was spying on you,
a former member of the Chinese military. A former member of the Chinese military started this telecommunications company, and they have been found lacking when it comes to some of their security, particularly in a lot of their 4G equipment that's been deployed to other countries around the world. But it's kind of hard to ascertain if it's negligence on the part of their software engineers and the software they use. There's been some things there have been some backdoors that have been found in some of the routing equipment and stuff, but that's typically normal in that type of equipment. But yeah, it was just, is it shoddy software or is it industrial espionage? I mean, this xenophobia is really sick in the sense that like these networks are going to get built one way or the other. Now, granted, I have the contention that like there's still a long way to go before we have ubiquitous 5G. I mean, between broadband satellites in orbit, the continued build out of 4G LTE, and, what little 5G will be deployed, at least in the sub 6 gigahertz range. I mean, what are they hoping to accommodate? Are they trying to ban all Chinese-made equipment for use in all telecommunications networks in the world? That's going to be tough to do because no Nigerian telecom company or some South American telecom company is going to buy expensive Qualcomm or Ericsson or Nokia-based stuff. So I don't get this. This is just more of this protectionist, mercantilist crap that really just irks me, right? Because it impedes progress. It's the reason why we can't get a ZTE phone on Verizon, or like Huawei was going to bring phones to Verizon, AT&T, but we're stopped.
Yeah.
Right? Was it ZTE or was it Huawei? It was one of the two. And I really wanted access to those phones through my carrier, but I can't get them through the carrier. I have to order them myself, which is fine. I'm gotten into the habit of spending $500-$600 for my phones now. But like, it's just protectionism, and it's gross, and it's not liberty, bro. It's not liberty.
Yeah. Anytime, I speak from philosophically, I'm totally, 100% open borders, 100% open market. Why are we controlling anything at any level? I understand there's practical tempering that you have to do at some point. I don't know. I struggle with that a lot, but I get what you're saying. Why are we? Is it fear? Is it control? I have a feeling it's more control than it is fear.
Yeah, definitely.
And maybe it's just straight up, trying to send a message. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess on a lot of different fronts, we're trying to send this much more stronger message to China, be it militarily or be it economically. From a geek angle, I just don't like it getting in the way of me getting access to cool stuff.
Right.
I ultimately understand the MAGA perspective of like, they have kind of been taking advantage of entering, ever since they entered the WTO in the early 90s. They've been eating our lunch, and there's no doubt that there's industrial espionage. I mean, I look at and read and see stuff every day. I go to Alibaba.
Yeah, but industrial espionage, I mean, that's everywhere, If you're
that's what I'm saying. Like I'm sympathetic to it. I mean, maybe if I were a maker, I would care. But I just don't.
Right.
right? And it gets me cheap stuff, right? I mean, I'm not Tucker Carlson here and thinking that like cheap stuff is in and of itself a sin to bigger American greatness. I just don't see. I don't like getting caught up in these battles, right? And it's just this trade battle between us and the Chinese. And yeah, I appreciate trying to have a much more sterner line, holding a line against Chinese mercantilism. But
Well, at the same time, from a security standpoint, I have to look, in the company I work for, we house and we're the custodians of a lot of credit data. I mean, 60,000 credit reports a month or more are coming to our system. I can go in there potentially and go look at any of these credit reports and steal that person's data if I didn't have the controls in place to know, okay, well, Gary Guthrie just went in, logged in, and did a full-on data dump of ABC Motors car dealerships credit reports that they pulled for the past 6 months, right? So I get that, and I've found myself, and this is not, this doesn't really touch on Huawei. This is more of a kind of a practical level discussion at this point, but I have had to tell my CEO I have the power to do this when he wants to go do something silly, like go get an unvetted vendor to come in and integrate with our systems. Sorry, I have to go and do some due diligence on this person. And I get that fear. I get that kind of panic up front, especially when you're dealing with China. So I can kind of be sympathetic to that point that overall, hey, we haven't checked this out. We don't have the visibility we need. We've got some serious concerns here. At the same time, I get the free market. Yeah.
So it almost seems like we need to yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're saying, like, stop worrying about outside influences, right? Like, I mean, worry about our controls within, right? I mean, it's, the not to get off on a complete tangent and stuff like that, I mean, we worry about, backdoors into our, servers and equipment and stuff like that. And like 9 times out of 10, most of the espionage that takes place it's sneaker netted.
It's an inside job. Absolutely.
I'm not worried about like the technical know-how and the technical hoops you have to jump through to like backdoor into a piece of core router equipment and then jump into, into another piece of routing equipment to a switch to a whatever. I just don't see it, and this is why this stuff kind of infuriates me. But I mean, I get the concern, but I mean that's for companies to deal with, the hassle of worrying. Is it worth the risk and the cost to buy Huawei equipment to build out a 5G network quickly?
Right.
Or is there so much baggage associated with that then the market will decide like, nah, whatever. But I also don't like U.S. government, kind of putting its hand on the scales there, because New Zealand and Australia already have banned Huawei equipment in the build out of their networks. I think it's just mercantilism at its worst, but yeah. That was about as ranty as I got. I didn't get too crazy about it. But with that said, I think the last thing we should probably get into is the Facebook had its F8 conference this week there in its backyard there. And Facebook has been quite in the news, particularly in the last 48 hours. But like the F8 conference is their big conference, kind of like Google I/O or when Apple has a keynote and stuff like that. I mean, they announced new Oculus stuff. The Facebook Messenger got an update. I think they got this Facebook. It's called Facebook Crush. I actually think it's called Facebook Stock. It's a new kind of. I guess they have this. I guess in other markets they have this dating service. That's built into their system. They're going to now go privacy first when it comes to how their platform will operate. I'm still, they I guess in the keynote that Mark Zuckerberg gave, I guess they addressed a lot of the problems they've been having head on this year, and particularly when it comes to the fact that they're going to have to set aside like $3 billion or something stupid like that to deal with potential fines from the FTC, European Commission, and whatnot. So, the big things, I guess, is if you haven't noticed, I don't know how often you go on Facebook, they've redesigned the Facebook web app.
Yep.
Particularly on mobile. Instagram has some new features. I'm not an Instagram guy, so I don't really care. Facebook Messenger now has a web app, which they've needed for a really long time. Oculus has a new kind of thing coming out, and of course there's the Facebook Crush, I call Facebook Stalk, which will allow one to actually it'll allow a lot more infidelity, because it's secret crushes, right? So you can poke someone, it's like, hey, you can be a true creeper to people, and like the Make Liberty a Great network Facebook group.
Okay. This just sounds so weird. I mean, don't we have enough stalkers?
I don't know. I don't know what you think of these things. I'm kind of liking the redesign for the mobile app and the web app, but I mean, Facebook is kind of done. I mean, particularly for I have teenage daughters, and they don't do the Facebook. They do the Instagram, which,
Likewise, yeah.
Big up to
Instagram and Snapchat.
Yes, and
gigantic.
And in the foreign markets in particular, everyone uses WhatsApp.
Yep. My wife's best friend from growing up lives in Spain, and they connected on WhatsApp, and it turns out my wife was born and raised in Ecuador, and her friend moved to Spain, and WhatsApp is like the only communication that they use between them and all of their friends from growing up. It's kind of amazing that this thing is like this global phenomenon that here in the US, it's like, what is that?
Yeah.
I don't
There's
have no
literally
idea.
there's literally only one person in the United States for which I use WhatsApp with. It's a friend of mine who lives in San Diego. Other than that, everyone else who is on WhatsApp are my father's family from Nigeria. And it's crazy when you get outside the U.S. Like, yeah, it's huge. Outside of China, it is massive. That was probably, it's kind of, there's great acquisitions that tech companies have made. Like, you got to remember, like, Google's purchase of YouTube was laughed at, right? Facebook's purchase of, Google's purchase of DoubleClick, Amazon's purchase of, who'd they purchase? They purchased someone, and it just kind of skyrocketed. I think Kiva Robots or something. Same thing with Facebook. When Facebook bought like Instagram, on the Instagram, it's just like, what? Why? It's growing almost as fast as their core product.
Right.
And when they bought WhatsApp, it's just like, well, why the hell would you buy WhatsApp? Well, there's almost 1 billion users why you buy WhatsApp, and particularly for international markets.
Yep.
The other big announcement that's probably going to make people upset, but I kind of don't see why people are upset about it, because it was inevitable, is they're going to allow unified communications across the messaging services of Facebook, Messenger, WhatsApp, and Instagram. Hopefully, and of course, because of their new privacy first initiatives, I assume it'll be opt-in. And that was going to happen, and you knew it was going to happen because a lot of the principal guys who started WhatsApp left the board, because it was inevitable that Facebook was going to, because when they bought WhatsApp in the past, so, oh no, you won't have to advertise, or you won't have to monetize, or whatever. We just want, that was a goddamn lie, to be honest. But I mean, and a lot of those guys left the board and left the company. They're billionaires anyway, and they've started consolidating their platform, and I don't really see anything the matter with it, and but yeah, it's going to make people upset. And of course, there's always, for developers, the ability to use and tap into Facebook's ad data, all the data it can. However, with the fact that they got beat up over Cambridge Analytica, because the Russia hoax wasn't the only hoax the global elite didn't like that they blamed on Facebook. Brexit.
I enjoyed Zuckerberg's testimony before Congress, probably way too much.
Well, again, these the fact that love or hate the man, the fact that he even has to go on bended knee to get berated by these people who don't even know what Facebook is, and have him.
They don't even know what the internet is. I mean, some of that stuff was so ridiculous. I don't know. You got a bunch of 80-year-olds trying to figure this out. I mean,
and then wanting to legislate based on their ignorance, which I think it blows me away.
Right. That's the part that just kills me.
Yeah.
But hey, that's what we get.
And so with that said, like the other Facebook news sliding in under the radar, not necessarily under the radar, but like under our little, I like to call my arbitrary cutoff window for finding stories to talk about, was the great right-wing purge, purging such luminaries as Laura Loomer, crazy right-winger, Alex Jones, crazy right-winger, Milo Yiannopoulos, crazy right-winger, and Minister Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, how a right-wing figure. When I saw that, I choked on my Guinness. It's like what? it's like I'm sorry. Louis Farrakhan is brother Farrakhan is many things. Right wing ain't one of them.
Right wing.
But like now, here's the deal. But then I read all these breathless stories from right wing outlets because I'm an evil right winger. Did you read? I put it in the show notes. Did you read that unhinged article from the guy from Human Events? And it's just like the guy is out for blood. I mean, he was like the night of the long knives. I'm like, well, I mean, it's not Night of the Long Knives or Crystal Knocked or anything like that. It's just some people who were fringe got kicked off of Facebook permanently. Yeah, that's fine. Well, it's not fine actually. It's actually kind of chilling. But like, here's the commentary I posted in the Make Liberty a Great Facebook group, and it's just like the battle is now joined. The left and the right are going to basically come together to intervene from a regulatory perspective on these platforms. These platforms, as instruments of free expression, will effectively die soon.
Right.
The Russia hoax and the 2016 election that broke the United States of America was the first straw. Dragging, like you said, watching Mark Zuckerberg get dragged up there and Jack Dorsey get dragged up there and yelled at because, particularly one side didn't like the results of the election, and to compensate for that side that doesn't like the election, the other side is pissed at Facebook because they are arbitrarily just, for lack of a better word, zucking people off the platform left and right. There's no culture of free speech anymore in Silicon Valley.
When you talk about a culture of free speech, I mean that to me, that speaks to me. Because I don't think we speak a lot about culture, values, language, or norms even, right? We've got this culture of, it's kind of weird, when we talk about the left and the right, there's no center point. There's no, if you come from the off the wall, which is what we do a lot of times, we look at the left and right as what it is. It's the clown world, right? And
yes, absolutely.
And we're coming at it going, oh my God, you people can't even talk to each other because this guy voted for Donald Trump and therefore he must be Satan because he hates everything. And you don't know anything about this person other than who they voted for or whatever, And
it's silly, right? You get the Trump derangement syndrome is a bipartisan affair, right?
But it goes both ways too, because you've got the Obama derangement syndrome too, right?
Oh no, and I'm saying I'm a recovering Obama derangement syndrome patient, but it only took me watching the 2016 elections, which broke a lot of things and changed a lot of minds, to see wow, that's what we were like, and and now you're like, oh wow, and there's just in these platforms there's just this, it's just a groupthink that is destructive. That they're literally. I went from going into Silicon Valley in the early 2000s or the mid 2000s, where they could care less about what happened in Washington D.C. or what happened in popular culture. They were these techno-utopian kind of libertarian-ish liberal types, and and I knew it was starting to fall apart when the net neutrality debate happened.
Yep.
And once I saw that, I'm just like, what in the hell is going on? And now they think it's a good idea to boot these people off when they don't understand. Like, yeah, you make your left-wing cocktail party having friends out there in the valley happy because you kicked off Milo Yiannopoulos or Laura Loomer or whatever. But all you've done is you've upset the right. And right now, you're already on thin ice with the left because Trump won and it's Facebook's fault. And then you already, or Twitter's fault, choose your social network. And then now you're upsetting the right because you're suppressing the voices of people who don't necessarily don't subscribe to the orthodoxy. And when the left and it's like from a libertarian perspective, right? We can speak frank as libertarians.
Yep.
When the left and the right agree on something, you better be damn scared.
Absolutely.
And that's what frightens me. This is bad, right? It's particularly Paul Joseph Watson getting permanently banned, who's right wing, but not Alex Jones. He's not Louis Farrakhan. He's not Laura Loomer.
Right.
Or what I affectionately call Laura Looney, right? But and then it's affecting Steven Crowder. It's affecting Daily Wire. It's affecting all these outlets that are on these platforms, and it's like this. It's only a conspiracy theory. They're only if you think they're out to get you, but they might actually be out to get you. And you're reaffirming the loonies.
Well, I think more than just being out to get somebody or whatever, I think there's a deeper problem or a deeper sinister thing going on. And even the people, the Facebook's coming out and saying, okay, well, we're going to ban this person for 30 days because they posted a picture of an offensive tattoo or something or whatever it was, right? And we end up, what it does, again, back to the cultural question, is it when that happens over and over and over and over again, and I have seen people at least once a week, someone I know is getting, a temporary Facebook ban or whatever. What it's doing to us internally is it's saying, you need to watch every single word you say every single time, and you need to be careful that what you're saying is appropriate and acceptable to the audience to which you are speaking.
And it creates a very dangerous precedent culturally.
Well, it's a precedent, but it's also, we're internalizing it whether we know it or not. This is human nature, because I'll go to,
like the old Soviet Union, yeah.
I'll go to a store or something, and as I'm speaking to someone in line, I'm finding myself questioning, and am I saying the right thing? Am I being careful enough? I don't want to offend somebody.
The same thing was true in totalitarian regimes.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily jackbooted thugs, snatching people up in the night randomly. It wasn't like microphones installed in every home and stuff like that. It was self-imposed.
Right, and that's where we're going.
The internalization
Yep.
of the fact that in our culture that you're right that will get us hurt and killed, and eventually killed probably. So yeah, it's Facebook is trying to take a couple steps forward with its much more privacy focused messaging and like interactions, but as long as they have now gotten into the business of being a curator of content, they've moved from the realm of being a platform to a publisher, and that opens them, and that will give the right a vector of attack to regulate. And then the left already wants to regulate simply because, like, if anyone's feelings get hurt, if anyone gets bullied, if anything, If anything could be, any incitement to violence or any act of violence could be traced back to Facebook or Twitter and stuff like that, then they want that regulated. And that's all
Right.
very dangerous.
And it's all in the name of protecting these poor people who have been oppressed for so long. And, it's this feel good type stuff where it's like, of course we have to do this. No, you people are missing the point. There's a reason why free speech is just that. It's free speech. You have to be able to express your thoughts. And whether or not it's offensive is beyond the scope of, what's right. I don't care if it's offensive. I'm going to say what I think. Okay, am I wrong? I might be wrong, but guess what? You have the opportunity now to come back at me and tell me I'm wrong, and this is why. And we can have a conversation. I don't need somebody shutting me down because at a very high level, this could be wrong, or this could be construed as wrong, or this could possibly hurt somebody's feelings. God forbid.
Yeah, and that's not universal either. That changes over time. What is considered wrong.
Yep.
Right. And we have a nasty tendency to look at things particularly digging up people from the grave and chastising them for what they did in the past based on our contemporary view of how they should act today versus like we can't project to the past the way they should have acted. And yeah, you see a lot of that across all these platforms, and I it's pretty gross, and I'd like it to stop, but I think we're not going to get that to stop until we get ultimately what both sides want, and that's market intervention or government or market intervention in the form of like a heavy hand of the FTC, FCC. You pick your 3-letter agency. Yeah, really, really, really bad week here for that stuff, and this escalation I think will not end well. Oh man, man, this has been kind of a fun-filled inaugural episode with my new co-host here. Any closing thoughts, man? If you want to rant about something, we can definitely go and attempt it.
I'm gonna save my rant for later. Once I can tighten things up a little bit more. I got to say, for a first timer coming in and doing this stuff, I enjoyed the conversation. I think that I could do this again, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. All right. Well, we'll try it again next week. And hey, we'd like to tell everybody that, thanks for bearing with us here while we try to get this off the ground. This is one of many podcasts that are going to be on the Make Liberty a Great network of podcasts. And, I just want to appreciate everyone and just kind of just stay with us, stick with us, man. We'll tighten this up. We'll make this boom, boom, boom. It'll be the tech news from the Liberty perspective that you will hopefully come to love. I am Thaddeus Preston, aka Nick Way. Follow me on Twitter at Nick Way, NICKWAYE. Gary?
I'm only on Facebook because I'm old, and I'll have to get that other stuff together at some point here and get me a bunch of hashtags or @ tags or whatever you call them, and try to at least speak the language. But it's been a pleasure being here. I am on Facebook. You can find me somehow, but I'll get you that information later.
Yeah, we'll get your Twitter game up, man. We'll get your Twitter game up. No doubt. So signing off, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for hanging out with us here at Thank You for Your Servers. We are now logging off. Later, fam.